Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me as always, some of the sharpest MMA minds in the biz. Joining me this week, all the way from Vancouver, it's Mike Bond, the titan of MMA media. Danny Segura, he's out in Miami, mi hermano de Colombia, the host of Hablamos MMA, and of course, Nolan King, aka Noli, aka the Boston Shot Color. Love that guy. Cold Coffee, future Emmy Award winner. I'm telling you right now, count on it. He's on the ones and twos, and we're going to get started here. All right. So last week when we finished SBC Live here, like we do every Mondays, later on that day, the news broke about Dana White. This is our first chance to react to it. As you all know, UFC President Dana White was caught in a physical altercation with his wife on New Year's Eve. The incident took place at a nightclub in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. While speaking with TMZ, White said the following, quote, "I'm in Cabo, Mexico for the holidays with my family, and my wife and I were out with the family on New Year's Eve. And unfortunately, that's what happened. I'm one of the guys, you've heard me say for years, there's never, ever an excuse for a guy to put his hands on a woman. And now here I am on TMZ talking about it. My wife and I have been married for almost 30 years. We've known each other since we were almost 12 years old. We've obviously been through some shit together, and we've got 3 kids. And this is one of those situations that's horrible." End quote. UFC representatives declined MMA Junkie's request for comment about the situation beyond White's interview with TMZ. Guys, there's certainly a lot to unpack here. Let's start with your reactions to the events in Cabo and what has and hasn't transpired since then. Mike, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of layers to this, as you just said, but want to go back to the headline we just showed from the TMZ story right there. Dana White's own words, there's no excuse. And there's not for this type of thing. Obviously, you know, you don't put your hands on a woman. It's not right. Where I come from, raised by a single mom and an older sister, like this is just pretty basic stuff for me. You don't put your hands on a woman no matter the situation. She hits you 10 times, you don't hit her one. I mean, this is just the way it works in my world where I come from. And I thought a lot of people agreed with that or lined up with that mindset of thinking. And I think we're learning as the situation plays out that maybe that's not the case. I mean, the people out there who want to say, you know, equal rights and things like that, come on, you guys all know this is not the spirit in which the equal rights movement was intended. We're talking about things like fair treatment, equal pay, equal opportunities, things like that, not when it comes to physical altercations like this. And when you look at the video itself or just put this situation in a box, what is equal about this situation? Dana White is significantly bigger than his wife, significantly stronger, and he did not just hit her back once. He hit her multiple times back. Looks like he tried to force her to the ground at one point in that video as well. So I don't really know like what we're doing talking in this conversation. I think a lot of people are kind of telling on themselves a lot with their reaction to the story and how they're doing it. And, you know, either if you're one of the people who are, you know, going out there, equal rights, equal lefts, or like things like that, just all these ridiculous comments, you're either trolling or, you know, something happened in your life where your vision of what is skewed from what's right and wrong is just not in the right place. So to me, I mean, Dana White is not defending himself in this situation. He is the one who said it's wrong, who said there's no excuse, and is condemning his own actions. So why is anyone else out there trying to defend him in this situation? It's perplexing to me. And of course, he's in the wrong here. I mean, what are we even talking about?
Very well put, Mike. I love that start. Danny, the baton is yours.
Yeah, it's crazy that we're even having this conversation. This is conversations you have with a 5-year-old, right? These are basic things that you learn as you're becoming a human being, right? Like these are things that you tell somebody that's a kid that's coming up. Hey, don't put your hands on a woman, you know, this and that. And it's crazy we're having this conversation with full-grown adults. And I agree with everything that Mike said. And just to add on to it, it's pretty crazy also the reaction that we're getting for Endeavor, as well as ESPN, and as well as some other journalists and media members, just the way they've been reacting to the news. And something that I want to point out is that they might disagree, or they might not, you know, be okay with domestic violence and all that, or putting your hands on a woman. But by not speaking about it, by not commenting about it, by not reporting on it, in a way, you're normalizing, even by not issuing a punishment on Dana White. And I don't know exactly what that punishment should be. I know a lot of people have debated that. But even by just not doing anything about it, you are normalizing, in a way, domestic violence, because everything is continuing as normal. Dana White still in his position. no repercussions whatsoever. Coverage more or less on certain websites look the same as it would otherwise look. So in a way, again, you might not want to do it, but indirectly, you are normalizing this stuff. This stuff, you got to talk about it. You got to say it's wrong. I mean, even Dana White is saying it's wrong. And there needs to be, in my opinion, something needs to be done. I don't know exactly what is the correct answer, but I do think something needs to be done. You can't just say, my bad, and then life continues as normal. Like, this is pretty outrageous behavior. And also, like, MMA has been, unfortunately, and combat sports in general, plagued with these kind of headlines, usually involving fighters, right? How the hell are you going to be able to cut a fighter in the future if something like this were to happen? How are you going to be able to justify that? Keeping in mind that now, the president of the organization now has a track record of it, and nothing happened, or at least for now, nothing has happened a week after the fact. So I don't know. We'll see how all this develops, but it's also been pretty disappointing and sad looking at the way this industry has handled the whole situation.
And Nolan, like I was pointing out, in a few hours, it'll be about a week. We had finished SBC, hours later this happened. That's why we're reacting now. But this whole week, the silence has almost been deafening, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, obviously the initial act, I mean, Dana said it himself. It was horrible. It was terrible. People try to justify it in the comments with the comments of, oh, she hit him first. But to me, there's no excuse. Mike and Danny have already said it. There's no excuse, but Dana owned up to it for the most part. I think his response was good. I think obviously the TMZ initial story, we can certainly criticize for the way it was handled. I think, doing the initial thing of trying to get him to comment when you're having a story like that come out, that's good. That's all fun. I think that's journalistic integrity. But the way that the questions were kind of angled at him, I thought were, trying to give him layups. He did own up to it to, I think a solid degree. But then you have all these people that are still sticking up for him in the comments and are saying, oh, well, she hit him first. I don't think, this is like something that two little kids that would fight in the park. Like, that's not a good excuse for that. Never mind a large, athletic, big guy hitting his wife. I don't think that was an issue of self-defense or anything like that. But to George, your point about, I think a lot of the criticism we know Dana's going to be criticized. He's been criticized. He's owned up to it to a certain degree. We have not heard from Endeavor, who I think is the one that has to make decisions going forward with this. I mean, Dana's said his part. I think you could obviously call for him to make his own decision, to step away or step down or whatever. But I think realistically, it should that sort of pressure, that sort of questioning, or that sort of responsibility should be on the parent company, which is Endeavor. And so the fact that they haven't even commented, they haven't even put a placeholder of like, we're looking into it, we're talking about it, we're deciding what to do. It's just been silence. It seems to me like they're just trying to make this whole thing, ignore it and it will go away. I mean, TBS pushed that the slap fighting show back a week. Why? Why did they push it back a week? What was the point of that? You know what I mean? To me, the fact that, they haven't commented either, like, you thought it was wrong enough to push it back a week, like, but you're indicating that something was wrong there. So I don't know. I mean, to me, it's just disparaging across the board. This has been already, what are we, what is it? The 9th, January 9th. It's like one of the worst years in MMA, like already. It's been 9 days. So I'm hoping as a whole things can turn around here. I think that this is a very pivotal moment in the sports history in terms of, like we said earlier, like how are they going to, what's the PR moves going forward? Somebody's going to get arrested at some point, I'm sure, for doing something. And Dana's going to be sitting up there and he's going to be asked about it. He's going to be the one that's weighing in on this. And I think it's going to be awkward. It's going to be on everybody's mind. And it almost discredits any sort of decision-making that he would have going forward. So for me, yeah, just a terrible situation all around. I think bottom line is that there's no excuse. And I don't know. I guess, first events this weekend. So we'll see what happens from here on out.
Sadly, I think, we used the word trolls earlier, and that probably is a good percentage of the people saying she hit first. But I think there's a lot of people that unfortunately feel that way. But did you notice Dana didn't say that? And I asked the audience, think about that. Dana ain't looking for an excuse. He's not looking for you to white knight for him. He obviously owned up. He said he was humiliated and embarrassed. He said he wanted to focus on his kids. Why are you doing it? Why are the fighters doing it? That's what I want to know. She hit him first. That's not even in play here.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously that was wrong too. Like that's part of the story here. But for me, I don't understand what the point of continuing to bring that up is. Like, is that just a way of trying to erase everything that happens afterwards? Like, does some people think that's just justification for, well, somebody hit somebody first, so anything that happens after that, is justified. I don't think that that's the way that you can view. That's not a good life view. You know what I mean? Like, obviously it's a bad situation all around. Him touching her to begin with was bad. Her slapping him was bad. Him hitting her twice was bad. Him shoving her, it was bad. But I think there's levels to the bad. You know what I mean? And I don't think it's a free pass for him to just act however he wants when something like that happens.
And if he's genuine about what he said to TMZ, that he's humiliated, embarrassed, and he's thinking of his family first, then I think something should have already happened by now, and that means pulling himself away from the UFC and the sport. That would be the best thing. I've seen that happen in other sports, but I think it would speak volumes. The fact that hasn't happened, the fact that Power Slap's only been delayed by a week, what you're doing is you're creating a culture for the sport. Because let's face it, the UFC is a majority of the sport, not all of it. No disrespect to the other leagues, but it's a huge portion of the sport. Your company, and it speaks volumes to the female employees, whether it's the fighters or the people at the UFC PI. And that's why I'm shocked that nothing has happened up until this point. I thought even ESPN, their broadcasting partner, same thing, very trepidatious in the way they were speaking about it. And that was disappointing because as someone who's watched ESPN for years and watched other people in sports, whether it's athletes, whether it's executives or whatever, go through these types of, problems, whether it's domestic violence or anything involving men and women, they've come at them a lot harder. And that's why I guess I'm just angry. I'm disappointed. And I don't know what else to say. Any final thoughts, guys? This has been a big deal. A lot has happened throughout the past week, but in case one of you wants to react to what anyone said or just add on, please go ahead. Mike, we'll go back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, again, as I kind of alluded to earlier, it's holding up a mirror to our sport and how people maybe perceive it from the outside, right? Like if this happened to, the commissioner of the NBA or NFL or NHL or MLB, I mean, this would have been probably a wrap a long time ago. They probably would have lost their job at minimum or, faced some serious consequences. But now it's just like, we move on to the next day. Dana White's posting, photos of him at the casino with the Nelk boys winning a bunch of money, posting his F It Friday videos. And it's just like, okay, well, just seeming like trying to roll on. And then, you see people from the outside, they're like, oh, it's the cage fighting promoter involved in a story like this. Maybe it's not a surprise to them. It's their expectation of combat sports, of mixed martial arts, and how, the overall perception of it. If, people want to be okay with that, then, I mean, I guess so be it. But like, I'm not okay with it. And I don't think anyone with a moral compass that points in the right direction should be okay with it either. So I don't know how, this gets handled specifically going forward. I'm not going to sit here and say Dana White 100% needs to be let go. I don't think I am the arbitrator of that particular situation. But if absolutely nothing happens, if Disney, if ESPN, if Endeavor don't put out, at minimum a statement condemning domestic violence, we don't stand by this type of behavior. I mean, I think the silence speaks volumes in that regard. So I just think that something needs to happen, whether it's Dana White, taking upon himself to take time off or to go out of his way to try to show that he truly does stand against this type of thing. And there should be consequences, whether it's like donating money or giving his time to organizations that are involved with this type of thing. There's lots of things that you can do to try to at least, paint a picture that this was a serious mistake you made and that you are going to try to make amends for it in some sort of fashion. So that's like things that I'd like to see happen. But right now, just like the silence is pretty shocking to me. You see UFC and Power Slap out there still dropping their daily promotional videos on Instagram and Twitter and stuff. Like it just all seems so incredibly backwards to me. And then the fighters coming out, rushing to defend Dana when he's not even defending himself. And you can talk about the Sean O'Malley comments that he made on his podcast. And a lot of people are saying that was taken out of context or that was a joke. I mean, these are not the type of things you joke about. And I know people will also say, hey, like, free speech exists. Are you against censorship if you're saying that you shouldn't be able to talk about this or joke about this? I mean, come on. Are you guys like serious with this? I mean, free speech. Absolutely. I believe in that. But like, what's right and wrong. Do you believe in that too? Do you believe that you shouldn't joke about certain things? You shouldn't talk about certain things in a certain light? I mean, this is like all pretty basic stuff, going back to what Danny said earlier, that you teach like a child about what's right and what's wrong, black and white in the world and stuff. So like, to me, it's just, you look at this entire situation from top to bottom, it's completely backwards. It's, shocking, but not shocking given the community that we're in. And I just hope, at minimum, we can look at this and reflect on how we can be better.
Yeah, good stuff, Mike. Danny, anything you want to add before we move on to the next topic? Like I said, I know there's a lot here to unpack, and I want to give you guys one more opportunity to react.
Yeah. I think pretty much everything has been said. Again, I think the biggest thing for me is that something needs to be done. I don't know exactly what, but even as I think Nolan had said, like even just like a placeholder statement, something like you can't just act like business as usual when something like this happens to literally the most powerful man in our sport. You can't just pretend everything's normal, because again, you normalize domestic violence. You are sending a message out there, whether you want it or not, that, you can be a very powerful man. And if something like this happens, all you got to do is say, "Oh, my bad," and life continues. Like there's no consequences for the action. So, yeah, just pretty sad stuff. Again, it's everything's unfortunate, and again, it's very sad seeing where we're at in the community. Anywhere else that you would tell this story, anybody else working in other sector, they would be shocked, right? But in MMA, it's like, I don't know. I don't know what's happening in MMA where people just, can't think these like very basic things, so yeah, all around just a pretty unfortunate, pretty sad story. We'll see how it develops, but from the few days that we've gotten into this whole thing, it seems like it's just going to get brushed under the rug, and life is going to continue as normal, as if nothing happened.
Yeah. Nolan, any final thoughts?
No, I mean, really, the biggest takeaway for me, and it's been mentioned intermittently, but I think it's really just the point to drive home here, is the fact that it seems like a lot of the debate going on right now, or the stuff out there right now that's kind of misdriven and misled, isn't actually coming from Dana, which I think is the weirdest part of this whole thing. Usually when we have these sort of issues in MMA, it's oftentimes the person that's directly involved that's, pushing back, and people are calling for, it's kind of a battle that way. It's a battle amongst the public, the media, and whoever's done something wrong. But in this case, it's the person that did something wrong isn't the one that's pushing back. So it's kind of odd to see all these sort of barriers of protection that are coming out of the woodwork, whether it's fighters, whether it's trolls or people, fans, whatever, or the silence from the business partners. So for me, it's a very odd scenario. It's an unfortunate situation, and I just think moving forward, I'd hope everyone remembers that when they talk about this, is the person that was involved has largely owned up to it. So, if he's not defending himself for this action, I don't understand necessarily why everybody else is.
Yeah. And
all you have to do, I love our viewers and I love the people who support us, but just read some of the comments in this comment section right now, and it drives home exactly what we're saying here, guys. I mean, come on.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty gross. I was looking at that too, and also like, do for the commenters? Let's kind of break the fourth wall here. But do you have any people in your life that you love that are women, whether it's your mom, your sister, your girlfriend, a friend, whatever the case may be? Like, do you want them to be in a world where to live in a world where, if a woman, first of all, you grab her by the arm and you literally detain her from trying to leave. And if she smacks you like that, it's a free for all. You're free to go and do whatever you want. Do you really want somebody in your life that you care about live in that type of world? I have a lot of women in my life that I love, my mom, I have friends. I certainly wouldn't want them to live in a world like that. So like, what are we doing? Think about that. It's crazy that, again, it's 2023 and here we are, we're discussing, well, she hit him first, this and that, he's got to defend himself. That wasn't a defense. Defending yourself, and look, we come from a world of combat sports. Defending yourself is leaving. It's blocking, whatever the case may be. That was an attack. Let's be clear about that. And also, at what point was Dana White in danger? Because I do believe, hey, look, if whether it's male or female, wherever the case may be, if somebody comes to attack you and your health is on the line or your life is on the line, yeah, I mean, do whatever you need to do, right? But in this case, it was so far away from it, right? So it's like, what are we doing here? And it's upsetting, like looking at all the comments, looking at the reactions, because these are people that at some point, you know, I believe are probably going to have interactions with women, right? And again, there's a lot of people in my life that are women that I care about that unfortunately have to live in a world where, you know, a lot of men have this type of view. So it's very sad.
That's the problem. A lot of them haven't had interactions with women. So like they are, I don't know. They don't get it. And you guys said it perfectly. Dana White would tell any of his athletes or anybody, if this happened under his umbrella, his employees, his athletes, we're also going to get them help, he would say. You know, if he really wanted to keep them around and he felt like, okay, we're not going to cut them or do whatever, we're going to work with them. That's exactly what he would say. And that's what he needs, because you know what? I'm glad you brought it up, Danny. There was anger there in that moment, you know, and there's like an extra shove, it appears. And then there's this moment. I don't know if you guys saw it. It's like a flex standing over, you know, and guess what? You know, that can come back. If it happened once, it can come back. Alcohol involved, you know, sure, of course. I think we've all been under the influence of alcohol before, and we might change in a different way. But still, I think that for the best of him, if we just want to talk about him and approach him the same way he would say, hey, when he's talking about somebody, one of his athletes that needs help, he needs to do that. He needs to back away for the purpose of his family, his company, his athletes, the sport. But I think it would be very, very good for him. And guess what? In sports, there's comeback stories. There's a lot of people in sports that have done horrific things, all right, either along the lines of this or even worse. And guess what? They've rehabilitated themselves. And after time, they've been given a second chance by people like us, by people like those commenters on that side, by all the people that surround us, because you know what? You can tell you were being genuine and sincere. You took it serious. You went out there and you became a better person. Second chances do exist, but show us something. You haven't shown us anything so far, Dana White. All right, let's go on to topic number 2. We got to move on here to Jake Paul. Here we go. The chat's going to get upset again. He's taking his talents to MMA with the PFL. Paul has signed a multi-fight contract with the promotion. He will compete in a new division known as Super Fight, with events on pay-per-view. No matchups have been lined up for the YouTube star turned boxer, who intends to compete in both boxing and MMA this year. Quote, I am so dedicated to this that I even offered Nate Diaz a 2-fight deal. First, we box. Then 6 months later, we fight MMA in the PFL Smart Cage and lay it all on the line. If that's not balls, I don't know what is, Nate Diaz. I'm down to fight you in your own damn sport. It's a 2-fight deal. Let's make it happen. So he's actually taking the role, because I guess there's some equity for Jake Paul in this whole deal. It's more than just him being, you know, an athlete fighting for the PFL. Yeah, nah, excited? We'll start with you, Danny.
I don't know. I'm kind of in the middle of it. I haven't been like the biggest fan of the whole Jake Paul thing in combat sports. It's been interesting, especially at the beginning. But if you were to retire today, honestly, I wouldn't lose much sleep over. If Jon Jones were to retire, I'd be like, come on, fight Ngannou, move up to heavyweight. Like, you know, I definitely feel a little bit different about it. But I'm also not on the train that's a Jake Paul hater that's like, oh, he's terrible for the sport. This sucks. You know, at times I've enjoyed it. At times I've been indifferent. So I think this is very interesting. And for me, like the interesting side comes from like the business aspect of it. I'm really curious to see how PFL launches this pay-per-view series, what it looks like, what it's going to entail. Because say what you want about Jake Paul, but one thing that you can't deny is that he is a very, very good businessman. He surrounds himself by very smart people, and he's managed to find a way to make a ton of money in combat sports, something that it's hard to do. We all know that, you know, that doesn't come very often. So the fact that he's joining forces with PFL and it seems like he's getting equity, as you mentioned, George, his people and himself, they must see something here, an opportunity. And we always talk about the number 2 promotion, right? For a long time, it's been Bellator. I still do think it's Bellator. If you look at compare rosters, who has better quality fighters? I think watching the Rising versus Bellator show, that was a big eye opener as far as like, hey, Bellator's got some really legit talent here. I still think that number 2 is Bellator, but I mean, PFL is changing. PFL is changing, and they're certainly trying to do everything they can to climb the ladder and position themselves as number 2. Will this be it? I don't know, but maybe they're onto something here. So I'm more curious about the business aspect of it to see how all this is going to look, how it's going to affect PFL and just the industry as a whole. Because for a long time, I mean, Jake Paul has been linked to MMA, but he hasn't been in MMA, right? It's been boxing. And as far as an MMA fight with the whole offer with Nate Diaz, that I'm not really that into. The boxing, yeah, I'll watch a boxing fight between Nate Diaz and Jake Paul. I have no problem covering it as well. But MMA, I mean, we're already talking about how the debate is, there's Jake Paul's getting all this attention, but he's not a high level boxer, and that's undeniable. Like we're not witnessing high level boxing when he steps in there, and that's okay. But if he switches over to MMA, he's literally starting from scratch. And MMA, there's so many facets to it. If you thought like the boxing wasn't great, the MMA is going to be way worse. And that I'm not really sure I want to see that. I think the boxing's fine. The MMA, I mean, we'll see how good he can get in a few months, but I wouldn't expect a very, very good fight, and that I'm not all that into. So we'll see. We'll see how this plays out.
All right, Nolan, you're up next. Yeah, excited. What do you think of the Diaz thing?
I mean, I think it's on PFL's end. Obviously, it's smart. I mean, we talked about this with boxing at nauseum, which was Jake Paul brings in a different audience, and I think he's bringing kind of that audience now to MMA. So I'll never hate on it. I think the more people that watch MMA, the better. But I do kind of question perhaps like what the actual prospects of him fighting are to a certain degree. I think if you look at what's unfolded, it's certainly more of a partnership, some sort of promotional deal where he'll promote them on social media and maybe he'll show up at some of the events and whatnot. But I'd kind of heard some rumblings of this back in October when he was going to fight Anderson. Obviously, that's under the Showtime banner and this is ESPN, but I kind of heard that it was more of if he wanted to take an MMA fight, he would have to fight under PFL. So for me, if I'm Jake Paul, why would I do this at this point in time? Like, to me, this is something that I would do if I suffered a loss in boxing. If kind of fell off a little bit, like it would be a way to rebound and get people interested in me again. So the fact that they're kind of talking about, he was saying 2023, I think I saw Don Davis say it was going to be 2024. So to me, it seems like they don't necessarily have like a solid plan for him to fight, but if he is going to fight, it will have to be with PFL. So it's interesting. I mean, maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe he will fight there, but I'm not saying he definitely won't. I just think that his focus is probably still on boxing for the time being. I think the Nate Diaz thing would be potentially one of those ways to get him to step inside the MMA cage because it has that boxing match attached to it. It has the fact that even if he goes into MMA and gets smoked, like there's a good chance he would beat Nate Diaz in boxing. So it would be even at worst, right? So good on the PFL. I think they're doing a really good job of spicing it up. I don't know how deep their pockets, if they're just going to have an endless supply of money or we're going to continue to see these big name signings, but good on them. It's certainly a healthy competition for that number 2 slot, as we talked about in our year-end awards.
Yeah.
show.
Mike, I'll spare you. I don't want to do all that again.
Right.
But let me ask you this, man. And then, of course, feel free to weigh in on the whole thing. But let me ask you this. You think it'll be closer to like what James Toney did? Little cash grab and then he bounced. Or maybe like what Clarissa Shields has done, where she really put in the work, kind of went in and did a couple fights. One went her way, one didn't. But there was a lot of respect, towards her, even though, again, she went 1-1.
I think probably like somewhere in the middle makes probably most sense. Like, I don't think Jake Paul is going to go in there completely unprepared in his mind. Like, I think he is going to probably try to hook up with the right people. I know like Javier Mendez has already come out and said that he would be open to having him come to AKA. So like, I think he's going to get the right people around him. He's going to take it seriously. He's going to train hard. I don't think he's going to like cheat himself in his preparation, whether that actually helps him in the end result, especially if in MMA he's fighting someone like Nate Diaz, who you could argue like that shouldn't even be a sanctionable fight given the difference of experience when it comes to that sport itself. But like, I think if he fights someone like Clarissa Shields did, not like someone Randy Couture level like James Toney did, an all-time great of our sport, like maybe he can make a good account of himself. You get him somewhere like in there with the guy who doesn't have much wrestling or jiu-jitsu or considers himself a bit of a striker. Like there's ways that you can do, but don't expect Jake Paul to come in and compete at the highest level of the sport. I mean, this is not the reality of what happens here, especially maybe it worked 13, 14, 15 years ago when Brock Lesnar came in with a bit of a wrestling background and a lot of athleticism, but you see how much the game has evolved since then. I think that would be really, really difficult to do against a proven MMA fighter. So we'll ultimately see, kind of in the camp with Nolan of like, I'll believe it when I see it fully, when he's like actually booked and making the walk. But we're already seeing the goalposts move a little bit, as Nolan alluded to there too, right? Like it was in the original statement, he's going to fight once boxing, once in MMA in 2023. And then his promoter comes out and says, maybe it'll be early 2024. So we're already getting some mixed messages as far as the timeline on this. But I do agree with one thing, that this is great for PFL's brand. I mean, if they can pull off a Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz fight under their promotion, that is absolutely huge for them. And that is going to be very, very significant. And that would, I think, really elevate their brand a lot. So I'm sure everyone in the organization is crossing their fingers. That's ultimately what happens here. I think just having Jake Paul's name associated is good for PFL's brand, but remains to be seen if he actually gets in there. But I think it's just further showing that he kind of is dabbling a lot in the world of MMA, and that more so of him being like a boxer in that world, he's really associated with our world. And that's why from the jump, given all the things he's kind of said about fighter pay and just like in the sport as a whole, fighting MMA fighters, like he is more of like an MMA guy to a degree than a boxing guy. So this almost feels natural in a way. But yeah, I need to see it actually happen, which I do, if we're making predictions here, think it will.
Nice. I hope it does. That would be massive. Big Booty Ben in the chat says, it's going to be like CM Punk all over again. So I think that's kind of in between Tony and Shields. You know, he went 0-2. She went 1-1. James Toney got waxed. But anyway, let's move on to the third topic. Former UFC lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov, who retired unbeaten, has been spending a lot of time coaching and was one of MMA Junkie's Coaches of the Year in 2022, along with Javier Mendez. But now he's making rumblings. So I'm not reporting facts here, but it's rumblings, man. It's what we're hearing, that he might be stepping away from coaching. What could this mean for all those great athletes from Dagestan who have looked up to Khabib and his late father, Abdul Manap? Nolan, what's on your mind, man? What do you think is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a big blow to that team, because obviously they have great coaches across the board. That's the reason that we did co-coaches of the year this year at MMA Junkie. Javier Mendez, one of the best in the game, had a great year, and I think was overlooked because of Khabib's presence. But I think when it comes to the mental side of this and the emotional side of this team and what they're, what you attribute their success to, I think it's a lot of it is on the mental side, and that's Khabib. He's the leader there. He's motivated these guys. I talked to some of the guys at AKA, some of the Americans that have gone through the training sessions with him too, and can really contextualize it in the bigger scope of what his training sessions are like and his motivational speeches are like compared to other more, big gyms here in the United States. And just kind of comparing and contrasting. And they really drove home the fact that he's such a motivator. So for me, I think this is a big blow. I'm not sure if he'll definitely be like totally out of the picture. Like I have a tough time thinking that he's not going to be cornering Islam going forward and trying to continue that legacy going. So I guess we'll really have to see what this means, what it means to be stepping back or whatever the right term for it would be. But obviously I think that team, when you lose a leader like that, even if it's half your coaching staff or half of your head coaches, like that's a big one, especially for the Dagestani guys that train with him on both sides of the world. So it'll be interesting. I think Khabib's proven to be a very interesting guy in his ability to walk away from things, whether in full or in part when he's on top. It's something we don't see at all in MMA. So props to him for doing what he feels deep down inside is right and spending more time with his family, if that's what the priority should be, which I think most people would agree it should be. Good for him.
Good stuff. In the chat, Brian Williams says, PFL just needs another spectacle with, I'm sorry. Mike, you're next. That's the whole last topic I don't want to go back to. Go ahead, Mike.
I'm not surprised particularly to hear this. Khabib did like a lengthy sit-down interview in Toronto about like a month and a half ago, and he seemed deeply conflicted about his coaching run and the wanting to split time and spend time with his family. And he was talking about how difficult it's been, not just even to spend time with his family, but to tend to all his other goals and kind of business things that he has going on the side. And I sensed with him a lot in that interview, like how conflicted he was internally, but he didn't want to do wrong by his fighters by, having one foot in and one foot out, essentially. And I think maybe we're kind of seeing him start to make a decision. I mean, he obviously had a spectacular year He's had a champion win the belt. He's had multiple champions from his staple of fighters. So like he's kind of accomplished it all at this point. I mean, obviously it would be great to continue racking up wins, getting more belts and all that stuff. But for him, I mean, like, I think he's kind of set out to do what he's needed to do in this regard, completed quote unquote father's plan or whatever. He's finished the job that his father set out to do with this crop of guys. And at some point he's going to have to step away. I mean, I didn't envision Khabib being in the corner until he's like 60 years old or anything like that. So maybe just do it now. I mean, this is a guy, obviously, coming from the religious faith that he has. Family is a hugely important part of that. And, if you even think back, I think when he fought Edson Barboza back in like 2019 or 2018, I think it was the day that his son was born and he missed that. And I think he talked about it at the press conference and like how much he was looking forward to getting back. So this guy has sacrificed a lot when it comes to the family element. So I don't blame him one bit for saying, hey, I want to go out there and, dedicate all my time to being with my family as much as he can. Do I think he'll be completely absent from the sport? No. From what you kind of pick up from some of the Instagram posts from like his training partners, his friends, I think more so than I think we just won't see him traveling as often and cornering as often, because that is ultimately the most time consuming thing for these coaches. You talk to other ones in the games, the ones that you see in the corners almost every week, say Saud, Eric Nixick, the list goes on and on. You're traveling out somewhere on a Wednesday of fight week, coming back Sunday morning, or Thursday of fight week, coming back Sunday morning. That is a lot of time to spend away. If you can axe that part out and, be living somewhere near his gym and going in, training the guys, then I think that's a lot more of a achievable schedule for him. So if I had to make a prediction without having heard him speak elaborately on what his plans are going forward, I think it'll probably be something like that. You'll see him in the gym coaching guys, helping them strategize, but we won't see him at the events as often.
I think he's going to do something like Henry Cejudo with the retirement, the time away. He actually, I think, got married and had a kid, and then he slowly started coming back, mentoring, coaching, and now even teased the comeback. I might stop a little short there because I now starting to firmly believe just Khabib won't do that. But Danny, what do you think is going to happen here with the Eagle?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I think he's gonna look, coaching is super taxing. You talk to any coach in combat sports and there's so much that they have to do and it takes up so much of their lives, because a fighter goes in and does their own training camp, right? They might help some partners here and there, but the coach has to be in every single one. And you often hear like coaches being like, okay, this week I'm in Vegas, and then the next week I get home for like a day, I gotta pack again, and now I'm out going to another part of the country or the world. And certainly, Khabib had a pretty busy schedule. So, it doesn't surprise me that he's stepping down, but I don't think he'll step down completely. I do think he's going to be available for his fighters as far as any advice, career-wise, or strategy, or even training. Khabib, he retired from the sport, but he didn't retire from training. He's still out there in the gym, putting in the work with the guys, and he very much enjoys that lifestyle. So I do think he's going to have some involvement. Again, this is just speculation. I don't think he's going to completely leave the sport behind, but probably his coach role as being like super involved as a head coach. Yeah, that's probably in the past. We'll see. Maybe he'll make an exception here and there with some fighters or some big fights. I was actually texting with Javier Mendez earlier today, and he was telling me that he's uncertain if Khabib's going to be in the corner for Islam Makhachev when he fights Volkanovski. So that's going to be pretty interesting. Obviously, Khabib's a big part of Islam's success. But something else that I want to point out, and it gets lost in this, I know Khabib and Javier Mendez won Coach of the Year for MMA Junkie, and I've seen in other sites and other podcasts and whatnot, just give Khabib Coach of the Year, and they feel like this is going to be a big blow as well. Let's not forget about Javier Mendez. He told me that nothing changes for him, that he's still going to be just as involved. And he's also a big player, a big part of this whole puzzle, a big part of the success that a lot of Team Eagle had. So let's not forget about him. He's still going to be around, and he's one of the best coaches today. So it's not all, doom and gloom for the Team Eagle guys. They still have, Javier Mendez, one of the best coaches today.
Oh, yeah. I've heard them call him father, the American version, obviously, but they think highly of him, and his gym has definitely produced a lot of gold over the years. Inspector Void was saying what you were talking about, Danny. He says Habib's leaving because he knows Volk beats Islam. Again, Danny says that as of today, we don't know yet if Khabib will be in the corner, but interesting take there. All right. Let's go to the next topic. Dillon Danis has pulled out of his boxing match versus KSI. I'll give you guys a second to react to that. You know, I know you're shocked by it, but according to Misfits Boxing's Mams Taylor, who is also part of KSI's management team, Danis has withdrawn from his scheduled January 14th boxing match against YouTube star KSI in London. KSI will now face fellow YouTuber, I hope I get this right, FaZe Temper. I mean, I don't know. In a video statement, Taylor said the following, quote, I got a phone call saying Dillon is pulling out of the fight. The real reason from what they said to me is that he's underprepared and he has no coach, might be struggling with weight, sorry. End quote. Where are we with this guy? Mike, it's back on you.
I mean, I'm not surprised necessarily. I mean, if you watch the hour-plus long sit-down interview that Dillon Danis did with Ariel Helwani a couple weeks ago, there was a lot of red flags there in regards to whether this was actually going to come forward. The chief of those being saying he doesn't really have a coach, doesn't have any training partners. You know, when he goes out in public, needs like security guards with him because he doesn't know if he's going to get into a negative interaction with, you know, someone who's followed him, I guess a quote unquote fan, or like a fellow fighter he's talked trash about, whomever it may be. So he's put himself in a very precarious situation as far as that goes. When you kind of take up this gimmick that he has where you hate on everyone for everything and, you know, just want to be the polarizing guy in every situation, that's what you're going to do. You're going to be polarizing to a lot of people and burn a lot of potential bridges that could benefit yourself in a lot of situations. I'm not going to sit here and be like, hey, when he signed the contract, he never had any intention of competing in this fight overall. I do think that Dillon Danis at a point, you know, whether that changed over time, wanted to do this boxing match, probably thought he was going to win. He was going to go in there and be able to handle KSI and get, you know, a fat bag of money for it. But it didn't come to pass in this situation. And now it's like, hey, what do you do from here? If you are another promoter of one of these quote unquote celebrity influencer boxing matches, do you trust him again to kind of bring him in and give him an assignment like this where you're going to be, you know, putting money down for promotion and things like that? I definitely would have some trepidation there. And then on the MMA side, like Bellator, if they want to welcome him back and book him in a fight, which is what he said in that interview as well, if this fight with KSI didn't happen, I think it was to Chael Sonnen actually, that he would just try to hop on the Bellator card in February or March. We'll see if that happens, I guess. But as of now, I mean, like, how much does Bellator trust him in that situation? You'd imagine on this big CBS card, they'd love to have his name on that main card or something. But do you trust him enough to put him in a slot like that when you know it may or may not happen? So just a lot of doubts around Dillon Danis. I mean, I think Daniel Cormier said in one of his podcasts that like we need to kind of send him out to pasture to a degree and just like don't give this guy any of the attention or the headlines anymore because he doesn't deserve them. I agree with that in a sense. You know, I would like to see him actually do something real, whether it's fighting or like actually paying his Twitter followers the money that he's promised them countless times over. If you retweet like this thing, whatever the case may be, I just want to see something real from Dillon Danis going forward, and then we can insert him back into narratives that are actually real.
Yeah, exactly. Just do something. Danny, you're next. But by the way, I want to pass something on from Thug Waffle, bro. He says, hey, that's a badass poster behind you.
Oh, this side. Yeah. UFC 100. Yeah, regarding the whole Danis situation, a lot of people have been angry and are kind of tired of him. And I get why. My reaction was different. It was more sad. And I feel like that's because I kind of had him as in a higher place than most people, like early in his career. Like I really do think genuinely that he was such a interesting prospect, and maybe I didn't think that maybe he was gonna become Bellator champion. I don't know if I saw that early in him, or even maybe challenge for a title. But I did think, and I tweeted about this when he pulled out of the fight, that he could have had, that this is sad because he could have had a respectable career in MMA. He could have had a winning record. He could have had even some big wins. I mean, he's obviously very skilled on the ground, and he was picking everything up as he went. Very young, he had access to someone like Conor McGregor where he could learn a lot from. It just seemed like he could have had a very successful career. And also, given how polarizing he is and his personality, like he could have been a big player for Bellator and an interesting name. But here we are, we have a fighter that's 2-0, hasn't fought in years, and you have a KSI who's a YouTuber or a streamer calling him a keyboard warrior, and that actually makes sense. Like KSI is the one that's actually fighting and being active, and Dillon Danis isn't. And it's sad that at one point he was such a promising prospect, and here we are having a YouTuber call him a keyboard warrior, and people are kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So, you know, in my mind, it's like, I don't know. It's just watching someone that had so much talent, not only for marketing, but skills wise, have it, you know, let it go to waste. I still don't think it's too late, but he is going to turn 30 this year. So, you know, you kind of wonder how much can he turn his career around, right? But yeah, I just feel like he could have been so much better. He could have been so much more. I feel like he had something going for him marketing wise, something going for him skill wise. Bellator was putting, you know, promotion behind him and matchmaking behind him, resources behind him. And yeah, it's kind of sad watching somebody with talent let that go to waste, because I do feel like Dillon Danis could have been so much better, could have had a respectable career in the sport.
Agree 100%. Let me add something to that. The other day on Junkie Radio Goes, and I interviewed Gary Tonin. Gary Tonin's like 6-1, decorated grappler like Danis, still doing ADCC every year and then doing some MMA. Yeah, there's been some lulls, the pandemic, or just not being able to fight. But guess what? At one point, he fought for a title. He had a chance at a major strap. It didn't go his way, but he's already dusting himself off, doing it again. I think Danis could have almost been in that same spot, around a 6-1 fighter, 5-2, 7-0. I don't know, but somewhere in that realm. What do you think, Nolan?
I think I can't care anymore. I just can't do this anymore. You know, I literally can't. Like, it's frustrating enough when there's fighters that have achieved greatness in MMA. Like, you know, when Henry Cejudo, for example, you know, is he coming back? Is he not? It just gets tiring, right? Even GSP back in the day, it was just on and on and on. And I get it. Those guys, part of the reason that we're so, that people are so interested in that debate on whether or not somebody's coming back is that they, deep down inside, really want to see that person fight, right? They really enjoyed their product. They enjoyed what they saw. They enjoyed the greatness that was in the cage. And for Dillon Danis, we didn't see any of that. So for me, as somebody that loves MMA experiments as much as anyone, I can't bring myself to bring this level of care anymore. You know, obviously maybe I'm in the minority. I mean, every time we mention the guy's name, people freak out one way or another. He's obviously very polarizing. He attracts a lot of attention. Even still, like with the fact that he has done nothing in recent years, the fact that he is still somebody that people are this invested in is honestly kind of impressive. But I've hit my point of just exhaustion with the whole thing, and it makes me wonder how much our audience is starting to as well. I do think, though, whenever he comes back and steps, if he ever does come back, I think that moment where he's actually in the cage will be probably a way bigger deal than it would have been any of his other fights would have been. But it's just, how can I care until that happens? I just can't.
And I think we need to know, I guess, just to round out the conversation, worth noting that he did have an extremely serious knee injury that apparently the surgery did not take. So how capable is he even of competing in MMA? Can he grapple to the extent that he was able to do before? Maybe that's why he looked at this boxing match. Hey, I don't need to do this kind of stuff as far as like explosive movement and get-ups and stuff with the legs. So I mean, I guess maybe we also need to consider the possibility. Maybe he's not even capable of fighting, period. And the only way that he's able to milk whatever time he has, whether it's from, you know, being like an influencer, quote unquote, being able to utilize all this traction he has for this limited window that's still left before he gets completely discarded and just no one cares anymore, or whatever the case may be. Maybe this is his only option in his mind as far as maximizing that. That's speculation. I don't know that to be true, but what is a fact is he did have a serious knee injury. And I wonder how much all of that, the recovery where it is now, which we don't know, ultimately plays into the behavior and just everything we see from the Dillon Danis package right now.
Yeah, and I know he's kind of the black belt that cried wolf here, but for people behind the scenes, people at Bellator who would be very honest about their dealings with him, I know people don't know what they can believe with Dillon Danis, but the knee thing, like Mike said, totally legit, devastating blow, multiple issues with that. So I will not hold that against. I won't begrudge him for that aspect. He's telling the truth with that.
Yeah. The tough part is he says he's good to go though when he has been asked about it. So if that's part of the whole cover up, I don't know, but he better do something because the 15 seconds are running out. Be more like Gary Tonin. You're turning into melatonin. All right.
Yo, hey, that's a good one. And he's out there getting into street fights. So it's like, man, how not that I'm saying like, you know, street fight is representative of complete like knee mobility, but like
Yeah.
You might as well get paid for it if you're out there, like, scrapping all these guys out in hotel lobbies and this and that. You might as well get paid for it and have it go on your record.
This is true. All right. Moving on to topic 5. Jon Jones had an interesting tweet the other day. #champion 2023. However, as of this live show, there has not been a fight booking for the former UFC light heavyweight champion. The man hasn't even fought since February 8th of 2020. We're almost going on 3 years. Jones will fight in 2023. Jones will be a champion again in 2023. Jones will be the fighter of the year. Well, that comes courtesy of Henry Cejudo. Fact or fiction? What am I speaking? Danny, go.
I mean, I don't know about fighter of the year, because usually those guys fight a few times, right? I'd be surprised if we get 2 fights of Jon Jones. I'm hoping we get 1. I'd be happy with just 1 in 2023, but I'd be surprised if he fights twice. So we'll see, but I really do hope that he comes back in 2023, because it's been almost 3 years of inactivity now that we're approaching. He's turning 36 this year. I'm not here screaming that, he's hit the expiration date, but I do feel like time is running out as far as if he wants to do something at an elite level, if he still wants to achieve greatness, push his legacy even further, because he is already great, and become a 2-division champion, light heavyweight and heavyweight, and maybe even defend the belt. I don't know. If he wants all that, which is still very possible and is still in the realms of in his realm, he needs to fight. He needs to fight in 2023. If you're going to come back when you're 37, 4 years of inactivity, I mean, that already starts sounding not so great. So I do feel like this is the year that Jon Jones needs to make a return to the octagon. And I really hope that he is. I'll plug in some of the work here that we do on the site. But yesterday, we published an article that I did on 23 fights that I want to see for 2023, and Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou is number 1. I mean, that fight checks all the boxes. If you don't get excited for that fight, you're not a fight fan. I mean, it's everything that you could dream of. Heavyweight title on the line. The GOAT coming up a weight class, facing adversity and activity against literally the biggest, scariest heavyweight that's ever existed. I mean, it's just a perfect story. So for the sake of the sport, for the sake of my fandom and everybody else's, please, Jon Jones, come back in 2023. And UFC, solve whatever issues you need to solve with Francis Ngannou. Give the man a contract. Give whatever he needs. He is the baddest man on the planet. He needs to be on the baddest organization on the planet. So, make that happen somehow.
In the stadium, Allegiant Stadium, International Fight Week. That's when it needs to happen. Although I want Jones to fight even sooner. But that fight alone, if he wins that's one hell of a comeback, and you're on your way to fighter of the year. Might need one more other fight because there's some gangsters that are doing good stuff, across different divisions. But how about you, Nolan? Fact or fiction?
Well, I think it's going to be a fact that he fights next year. I do feel very confident in that. Again, like I've said on past episodes, it sounds like he is not necessarily the reason for the delay, which I think is a good sign. It's something that we couldn't have said in recent years. So that's a thumbs up there. In terms of being champion, I think sometimes with him, like obviously all eyes are on Jon Jones, no matter who he fights. But let's think about who he's facing here in the circumstances, right? So fighting Francis Ngannou is the best heavyweight on the planet, one of the scariest MMA fighters of all time, who is arguably in his prime. I think people are kind of overlooking that tall test that's in front of him. Like, oh, John's going to come back. He's already achieved greatness. He was the light heavyweight champion, and now he's going to go out there and get this belt too. So don't overlook Francis Ngannou. I would probably lean with Francis at this point, just because we haven't seen Jon fights for so long. We don't know what to expect. So I'm gonna stop there. I'm not really sure we can even have really the discussion about the fighter of the year, because I think that's just too many steps down the line. I'm gonna call fiction on that one.
All right. Mike Bond, will close with you. Jones will fight in 2023. Jones will be champion again in 2023. Jones will be fighter of the year. Fact or fiction?
I guess I'm going to say fact, fiction, I guess, on the last one. As kind of Nolan said there. It's just you do have to put in a little more of a body of work than like one fight or 2 fights to be the fighter of the year. But, man, it's just so tough. My gut, do I want Jon Jones? Do I want to see him fight? Of course. But someone, I can't remember who exactly it was on Twitter, referencing that champion 2023 tweet. There was also a champion 2022 tweet and a champion 2021 tweet. that he put out, and we still haven't seen him fight. So like, how am I supposed to believe that champion 2023 is like any more realistic than those things? It does seem like it is coming, it is looming. Who it's going to be, what the circumstances are going to be around his comeback, that remains to be seen, I guess, what the UFC can figure out. But I do think we'll fight this year. Whether he wins that or not, I mean, who's supposed to guess, man? Like, we don't really have a ton of history. George St. Pierre, I guess, took like 4 years off, came back, won the belt against Michael Bisping. But, it's a long time off for Jon Jones. He's been through a lot, emotionally, physically. How's he going to carry all that weight? There's just so many unknown factors that go into this return for him. And he's fighting an absolute monster in Francis Ngannou, who is coming off a serious knee injury, a year plus long layoff in his own right. So like, what condition is he going to be in terms of being able to implement his entire game? So just so many questions around this entire situation. You can think whatever you want about Jon Jones as the person. He is obviously one of the greatest fighters of all time that we've had. And, I think it's better for the sport when he is competing, and I think better for his own, mental health when he is competing as well. But I just hope that this deal can get done and we can kind of stop talking about this part of it and start talking about what we're actually seeing in the octagon.
Yeah, I'm going to go with fact. Fiction. I just don't see him getting past Ngannou. I feel like Cyril Gane is kind of like a Jones type, but at the heavyweight. And Cyril came up a little bit short against Ngannou. And Ngannou was injured going into that fight. But, hey, it's two different men. I get it. Two different styles. But there's some similarities sometimes I see between Gane and Jones. And feel like I've gotten a little bit of a blueprint there. But Ngannou is coming back from serious injury and Jones coming back from serious layoff. But yet we're all seriously excited about it. All right, great stuff this week. I do want to say one last thing. We just don't have time for the additionals, and we appreciate the comments, good and bad. Thank you for tuning in. Look, these last few weeks have been unlike any other that I remember while covering the sport for the past 15 years plus. A lot of mixed emotions of sadness, anger, and gloom. And then I read about the passing of Victoria Lee, a one championship atomweight athlete who was 3-0 and scheduled to compete soon at One on Prime Video 6 on January 14th. It was coming up. She's the younger sibling of one championship world champions, Angela Lee and Christian Lee. She was only 18. This is devastating to, obviously, them. Our thoughts and prayers are with the Lee family. And, man, this has just been really, really a sad time in MMA. And I'm hoping that in 2023, things start to change. But thank you all again for tuning in. Tune in every week on Mondays for Spinning Back Clique. Myself and my awesome colleagues like today, Danny, Mike, and Nolan, and of course, Ken behind the scenes. He is our 2022 champion for picking fights. I wanted to give him his props. We'll see you all next week. Go out and be a champion.